again, Sam Maloof Woodworking.
I was just wondering the status of that coffee table that Sam's been working on for 18 months.
Well, you got it, and as soon as it's ready, you know you'll get a phone call from me.
I've gotten phone calls in the past about, somebody calling me up, and I'll say, well, it'll be about a year before I can get to it. And he said, well, I'm 70 years old, and I'd like it before I die. And I'd say, don't worry, just wait for it, and you'll live longer. And now they call up and say, well, you're 88, and I'd like a piece of furniture, but I want it before you die. And I throw my hands up and think, I liked it the other way better.
It's an extraordinary experience to sit in a Sam Maloof chair. It's something which really takes you beyond what you're normally familiar with. You suddenly find, even though it's made of hard wood, your body fits into it like a glove. You in fact begin communicating, whether you like it or not, almost intuitively with Sam Maloof himself.
Every person that I've ever worked for has become a very, very good friend, because I deal directly with the person. You make something, you sell it, they enjoy it, then I start a whole new cycle again. So each piece I make is a renewal of my life, really. And I felt that way very strongly, and a little bit of me goes with each piece that I make. I have these from the time I started. So I have a record of everybody I've worked for.
Sam began as sort of one of the early generation of what we now know as the studio craft movement.
There. Whew.
Well, Sam, of course, calls himself, well, I'm just a woodworker. And while every woodworker tends to know him, every museum curator also knows him. And every craft collector, again, isolates him as somebody for whom you have to have a work in your collection. Take, for example, President Jimmy Carter. He understood and valued that kind of energy, skill, craftsmanship, and collected this form as just a wonderful piece. Jimmy Carter, of course, was not the only White House inhabitant to have a Maloof rocking chair. Ronald Reagan had one. And there's a wonderful famous photograph of Ronald sitting in a chair with Sam and Frida on the other side enjoying the chair.
One of the things that I've learned that I didn't know about before is how many people there are in this world that love woodworking, even if they're not woodworkers themselves. And everywhere we go, people seem to know Sam. This
lady stopped and said, you sure look like Sam Maloof. And I said, I am Sam Maloof. She said, oh, wait till I tell my husband. He's wanted, and that happens all the time. It's really funny, but it's sort of interesting that people that I do not know or haven't heard of recognize me from what they've read about what I do. This is ricotta here. All of this is ricotta. This is Brazilian rosewood. This is all walnut. Look at that one there. I was at this lumber yard and I saw these two pieces of wood. I said, are they for sale? And he said, yes. It was Brazilian rosewood. I said, fine. So I paid him for them. Then he said, I had somebody came by to see them. It's building a new house. They want to buy them. And I said, they're not for sale, though. I paid you for them, they're mine. He says, yeah, but wait till I tell you who they're for. And I said, I don't care who they're for. I said, I don't want to sell them. And he says, but it's Brad Pitt. And I said, who in the hell is Brad Pitt? He says, you don't know Brad Pitt, the movie star? And I said, oh, yeah, I've heard of him. And I said, but tell him they're not for sale. It's kind of, nutty, me buying all this wood, but the boys will be able to work on it for years.
I came to work here for Sam when I was 22.
I was 19.
I was 19 when I came to work for Sam.
I was in the shop and I looked out and I saw this young man with his head hung low walking up the driveway, and It was Larry.
He made it very clear to me it was only for the summer. And I said that was fine. It was interesting work, but we hit it off right away.
And then I met Mike in a shopping center.
I had heard Sam speak, and I knew who he was, and I recognized him. And so when we saw him there in the mall, I was rather excited to see him in public.
I invited him to come to see me, and I liked him, so I hired him the very next day. And then David was in school with Rebecca.
I had some oak material under my desk in geometry class, and she was asking, you know, what are you doing with all this wood? And I told her. She said, well, you had to meet my grandfather. He's a woodworker. I thought, okay, you know, check it out.
They're like my children, really. I'm not the employer, and they're the workers. We all work together. Or I still do the designing. I still put everything together, and I'll just say, well, Larry, would you work on this piece? Mike work on that one. David work on that. But then the three of them get together and kind of know what they have to do.
The way Sam works, he brings in, say, the 8-quart for the seats. Then we lay it out for Sam, and he lays out the lengths he wants and the number of pieces, and then Mike will help him with the initial cuts, because the boards some of them are 12 feet long, and he cuts them on the bandsaw. So we go through that, and we cut out all these blanks, and then Sam mills them, runs them through the planer and the joiner, and mills them all to size. And then he starts kind of orchestrating the grain pattern for each seat. There's a general width for a rocking chair within an inch. And so as he's picking out wood, he may have a piece that has a little knot on it that he doesn't want showing in the surface, so he'll cut that out so that each seat is its own width. They're all individually made. They're not like a production shop. And I think some people don't understand that even though he may do 6 at a time, every one of them is different. And so he'll lay the seats out, and he goes through a process of pre-cutting them, cutting the joints so they get the nice curve that he has in them. Then those seat blanks go into Dave.
What Sam will do is he'll take 5 pieces of wood, and he'll cut the angles on them. And there's a 5-degree on the rocking chairs, I believe, and a 3-degree on the seat, and that's what gives it its shape here. It's not flat on the bottom. It actually will be rounded here and then come up, and just gives it a nice swooping shape. So Sam will glue this together, and before he glues it together, they typically look like this. And then he'll take it to the bandsaw like he does, and he'll freehand, and he'll cut out some of the excess material before I get it. And that's what you see here, and this is all done on the bandsaw. And that just saves a little bit of time when I go in with a grinder and shape it by hand. And I asked him when I first started, I said, well, what happens if I ruin one? And he says,
well, you probably ruin 3 or 4 or 5 of them, but you're not going to learn unless you do it. And so when I give this to David, I've cut this out for the leg, I've cut this out for the leg and this, and then this is all in the rough. I cut this out on the bandsaw, I cut this out on the bandsaw, that on the bandsaw, that on the bandsaw. Then he takes a disc sander and sands all these out like this.
And then I'll come in with some finer grit. I'll take the body grinder and remove some more wood. I'll have to shape the back here and get a curve into the back. And I turn it over. I'll do the bottom. And then I'll finish it off with just a 2-inch grinder. And I just kind of freehand it and try to get as close to the line as I can. And just bring it around. And
they go to Sam, and in the meantime, he's started cutting out legs. He'll cut the back legs out first.
People have asked, well, do you spend a lot of time drawing and all that? I don't. These are all mental drawings that I have in my head, and I have thousands of them that I want to do.
He routes those and fits the joinery and starts gluing the back legs on.
Then you see how that goes together. It's a real good lock joint. And the process of making a chair, I can go from scratch. For example, here I'm going to cut these out in a few minutes. Those are for a rocking chair. But I can pretty much assemble a chair in a couple of days, or a rocking chair. But then it takes 2-3 weeks of shaping and sanding.
The whole process, if we were to run straight through, depending on the wood, may take 3 to 3.5 weeks. We have so many pieces going at one time that rarely do we take one piece just straight through. We're always jumping around from piece to piece.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there's one way. I have 12 pieces now that I'm working on all at one time. I'll work on this, then I go to something else.
He's making individual pieces. They're not production. And he's getting up and down all day long. He's getting a lot of exercise. He's getting a lot of movement, and he's not getting bored. I get bored because I do, after 10 of those, I'm bored. He's not.
I still design everything, and I put everything together, and then they carry on from there. In fact, like, say I'll give them this chair here, and it's pretty much rough shaped, and they'll go ahead and do all the finishing work on it, which is really very difficult.
Probably what I would do at this point is turn it on its side and start shaping these front legs to where they blend into the seat. And so it's just a matter of removing a lot of material and continually looking at the form to make sure that it flows properly.
Then they go back to Sam and they get arms put on.
This fits in here like that. There, you see there, it's a perfect fit. Sometimes I luck out.
Then they come back to us and we shape all the arms, the front legs and all of that, and do some pre-sanding. And then we usually lay, if it's a rocking chair, we'll lay out the spindle holes and get it ready for the back, which he will make next. It's not about sitting down and designing something. It's about receiving something and reacting to things, and I think that's his genius.
I think God gives us all a gift, and some of us use these talents, and some of us do not. And I've been fortunate that I've made my living at something I love to do. It has to fit perfectly, and then the spindles go in.
So we'll do some shaping on this, sanding, refine this whole form here so that when the spindles are in it, we don't have to do much work around the spindles.
And then we take it back, and usually Mike and I will cut the spindles out, shape those. That takes about a half a day to do a set of spindles and get it ready to put in the chair.
What we do is make spindles out of 6/4, that's 1.5 inches, and then we bring them down after we plane them, and we'll put them into groups like this, and you'll see some there. I don't, everything that I've cut out aren't spare parts. They are an order that I have to get to. So these will go probably on this rocking chair here. I don't think you can see it, but this is where they go right here. I have the holes marked, and these will go in.
After we glue them in, we turn the chair on its back, then we can sight. I can sight through here and look at the plane of the spindles, and then we go back in and shape those so it's just a beautifully continuous line through there. And at that point, it goes back to Sam, and he puts the rockers on.
And when I put the rocker on, I have to pull the back leg in, so very careful with a clamp. I pull it in just slightly. Then there's a point on the dowel for the front, and then I say a little prayer and I smack it one, and it slips right in.
We bring it back in here, and then we shape the rocker joints and start the final sanding. So you can see that the chair is really traveling, all the time.
So this one's ready for a coat of oil now. We gave it a coat this morning, and now this afternoon we can give it another coat. What we do is put it on very liberally, like I'm doing here, just kind of slop it on over the entire piece, and then let it sit for maybe just a couple minutes, and then the most important part of the whole process is just wiping it off as thoroughly as possible. I've always felt like the oiling of the pieces is kind of the reward of all the hours of working on them, because you get a chance to really see the clarity of the grain, and even though the pieces are beautiful for years and they actually gain a patina over time, you know, with the just the age of the piece and the people touching them, I always figure, you know, they're really not going to look any better than they do right now. So I get to see it that way.
I used to have decals, and then I decided to do it this way better. And what I do here, I put the initials of each of the boys that works with me. I put all their initials on everything that I make.
Sam likes to have these sit around for a week or so, a few days, so he can kind of absorb it, I think. And he also likes to photograph them, of course. I don't know if you can if you can see that grain come up, but the reflection might be too. Well, there it is.
I'm self-taught. Well, I was a graphic artist, but I didn't have any training. I went to work right out of high school. Then I met Frida at Scripps, and she was there for MFA, and she married me instead. And we were both flat broke, didn't have furniture or anything, so I made furniture out of dunnage. And somebody saw it and liked it, and they did an article for a magazine, and it took off. But it was just all word of mouth. People saw what I did, and then I was invited to different exhibits, and then different museums started collecting my work.
In 1972, the Smithsonian Institution opened its Renwick Gallery. And the Renwick Gallery is dedicated to exhibiting and interpreting contemporary American crafts. And the very first show that it had was something called Wooden Works. It was a 5-man show. One of the 5 people, Sam Maloof. So from the very opening of the opportunity to show Maloof works, the Smithsonian chose it. 2001, I had an opportunity to follow that up with a 1-man show about Maloof. The only one that had ever been done, which showed him from the very earliest years up to the very latest.
If it hadn't been for Frida, I would never have done this. It was her faith in what I could do that sustained me. She was the heart and soul of what I do. She still is, really.
I think he would tell you that he wanted to give up several times along the way, but she kept him on course.
She was just a wonderful lady, and she very much loved Sam and was there for him all the time.
The greatest tragedy in my life was when Peter went away. And it was awful hard. It was very, very difficult, but I kept working. I just knew that I had to straighten out, and because Frida would want it that way. I made her casket. The 4 of us, I think, were crying the whole time we were building it. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever made. And she's buried on a little mound here. I'll be buried next to her, and I do want to be buried in a pine box and with boots and Levi's and a white T-shirt that I had on when I first met her. And that's the way it'll be.
It was a very difficult time for Sam, because without Frida, it seemed that he was going to be incapable of focusing and being able to get back to work. And then something really rather remarkable came about. He began to go out with a woman who lived not far away, and who had been one of his very first clients.
I think probably the thing that appeals to him, to me about him, the very most, is his twinkly eyes. When he's so full of enthusiasm and he's telling a story and those eyes just dance.
I had done furniture for her when she was about 23, 24, and we remained friends. We didn't see each other very often.
It just happened that we'd see each other every once in a while. He had a birthday party, I came to that.
She came to my lecture, and she held my hand, I recall, and I thought, well, gee, that was nice.
They had a show here of Mexican folk art, and I came with my son.
And I thought, whew, she sure picks him young. I mean, he looked like he was about 40 years old, 30 years old, and it turned out to be her son.
About a week later, my son called me and he says, "Mom, I've been thinking." He says, "I think you should date Sam Maloof." And I said, "Well, why would you say that?" And he said, "Well, he's cool." Oh, the heart is a resilient thing, recovers from most anything. If given love and care and healing time, you can mangle, mistreat, and abuse it, but you can never really lose it. When the right man comes along, it'll work just fine.
She sang that at our wedding after we got married, and everybody just roared. And I did too. This is the old house here, and I built the house over a period of about 25 years, and Frida and I lived in it for over 50 years.
The home functioned as his showroom. He didn't have a big downtown gallery. He didn't have somebody who was marketing his materials. He was a small shop owner. His wife was a business manager. And if you wanted to come and order a piece of Maloof furniture, you could come up, knock on the door, Frida would let you in, and you begin to look at how the Maloofs used their Maloof furniture. And then it became something to which you really wanted to go. In the 1960s, era of hippies, when the whole woodworking movement really began to have a kind of a critical mass of people who really wanted to work with their hands, people would drive for miles. Sometimes they would fly from London, turn up on his doorstep, knock on the door, and say, "I've heard so much about this place, can I see it?"
Sam's house sat about right on the edge of that freeway. The whole site was 6.5 acres. It was lemon grove. There were 2 houses that sat on the site with a guest house. Sam had made some furniture for me, and in sitting down with him one day, he pulled out a map and said, there are plans to build a freeway that would take half my property and come right up to the house.
They thought they could go under us, and it would cost $75 million, and we'd be on top of the freeway. And I said no, and then they said, well, we'll go around you and underground and then put the grove back in. And I said, no, I just don't want to do that.
I got a consultant named Knox Mellon, who was the head of the State Historic Preservation Office, and we began to then negotiate with the agencies. After a significant amount of stonewalling, they acknowledged that this was a site that was eligible for the National Register of Historic Places.
The state was then forced to take it, rebuild it, make it absolutely as accurate a representation of where it had been, but in a different environment.
When they moved the old house, I'm surprised that the people that moved it were experts, and it went back together like a crossword puzzle. Well, I haven't changed anything. This is the way it was, and all. And
the house is open to the public. The gardens are open to the public. And underlying it all is this mission to encourage arts and crafts and to help people understand the value and the specialness of handcrafted things. And so it's a wonderful place, wonderful use for all of the years that Sam and Frida supported artists. And so they're continuing to do that through this foundation.
We have lifetime occupancy of the houses and the shop, and after I'm gone, Beverly has full-time occupancy, and the shop has full-time occupancy. And so what I've done is given each of them, I've given my wife a 6th, I've given Roz a 6th, I've given my son a 6th, and each of the boys a 6th, so that after I'm gone, they'll own the business, lock, stock, and barrel.
I'm very grateful for it, and I'm grateful that he hired me and that it's lasted so long. And to be able to continue that, that really means a lot to me. It really does. I even got a tattoo with the Maloof insignia. It's just kind of a tribute piece. So. Where is it? It's on the back of my leg. I'm hoping that he'll sign it for me eventually.
I decided who I'm going to buy a Porsche, so I bought a little Boxster.
He bought that for his 85th birthday, And he enjoys that so much. He gets so much pleasure out of it. It's a wonderful car. He's a great driver. I never worry about him at all.
I love it. I just love it. And I've had it up to 135, I think, out in the middle of nowhere, but that was awful fast.
He's 88 now. He still works with us every day, and it's just amazing. He's a huge inspiration. I hope to be going at that age. I think he's an inspiration to a lot of young woodworkers. Just the fact that he's made a living by doing what he's loved. I don't think too many people are able to do that or say that.
I find that it doesn't work. I can say I retired 55 years ago, because what I've done is just like, well, doing what I want to do, and not very many people are able to do that, unfortunately.
For me, first and foremost, is to make a beautiful picture. But if it's just purely aesthetic experience, it's not good enough. That beauty needs to be undercut with this kind of undercurrent of something psychological or dangerous or something desirous or fearful. Ultimately, I want it to all become one world upon itself.
I think Gregory is a very important figure within the history of photography. I think he has shifted the language of photography significantly in the past decade.
Pharrell Williams here.
Hi, I'm Joy Bryant.
I'm Eric Ripper.
I'm Tom Colicchio.
I'm Dr. Frank Lipman, the host of On the Table.
The host of Across the Board.
Host of Artist Talk.
Host of Hooked Up.
Host of the show, Be Well Week, Be Well Weekend, on the Reserve channel.
It's only on Reserve.
Did you know that you can follow my show on social media sites like Facebook?
Follow us on Twitter.
If you're a fan of my show, hit the like button.
All of the above.
Share me with your friends.
Treat yourself. Check out a new episode of my show, Hooked Up.
And if you want to leave comments, feedbacks, ideas, whatever, love to hear from you. Leave a comment.
And if you don't want to miss the show, be sure to subscribe.
The one that's like down here, or is it here? Somewhere down here.
Thanks for watching the Reserve channel.
Only on YouTube. Throw caution to the wind and ask yourself what rules.
This is the part I like, though.
Well, don't that story of the chair remind me of my love affair with a no-good cheating man of mine. He drove my poor heart through the mill and to the top of Heartache Hill, and then he dumped it on the highway of love, but it's working just fine.
You're embarrassing me in front of all these people.
Good afternoon, Sam Maloof Woodworking.